Good afternoon, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day and God bless you. Let's get into the news. We've got a fascinating development at the southern border. It's been reported that patriot militias are actually entering into Mexico to fight back against drug and human trafficking that skyrocketed under bumbling BOD. And we're gonna see what's going on the southern border and why it signals nothing less than the rise of a new conservative age. They're being called border militias, patriots who've up and left their homes and careers to travel south and patrol the southern border to curb the surge in human trafficking and drugs like fentanyl that are coming across the border in droves as a result of the deliberate abrogation of border security responsibilities by the Bond administration. Dozens of groups like Patriots for American Veterans on patrol are organizing at the southern border and often working together with Border Patrol law enforcement officers to deter and apprehend those caught violating border laws. In fact, there are so many of them that they're actually finding themselves in a bit of a competition to occupy the best locations among the sites that see the most activity of illegal border crossings. And perhaps because of this competition, it's been reported that these patriot militia groups are indeed more and more starting to cross over to the other side. They're entering Mexico in order to curb and push back would-be border crossers. Now, astonishingly, this has upset the left-wing media. I kid you not, they are upset not only with the militias interfering with people crossing illegally into our nation, but I kid you not, they're upset that these border militias are illegally crossing into Mexico. It's one border boy with two fundamentally opposed reactions from liberals, depending on which direction you're traveling. It's absolutely astonishing, and I think it demonstrates how logical consistency is hardly a left-wing attribute. Vote regardless. It is true that patriot border militias are increasingly cutting the human and drug traffic flow before they even reach the border. And if they do reach the border, chances are they'll encounter even more patriot militia members. And that's because the presence and influence of militias is so prevalent at the southern border that the ultra-left and highly discredited SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, nevertheless admits that patriot militias have basically taken over the southern border, and they're doing so in large part in cooperation with federal law enforcement. Now, this is a pattern that we're seeing throughout our nation, a pattern that leftists liberals actually only have themselves to blame for. Both national organizations and smaller statewide militias recruited heavily from current and former law enforcement, as well as military personnel fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. In fact, thousands of active and retired law enforcement officers have joined militia organizations over the last few years, and many believe this number is currently swelling. Given how leftists' lawmakers are so quick to disavow the police with their defund and disband rhetoric. This is what makes all the complaints from the legacy media that so often champions to fund and police rhetoric so utterly ridiculous. You see, during the race riots in the summer of 2020, The Washington Post complained that law enforcement actually welcomed the assistance of patriot militias in response to BLM protests. Some of the media went further, suggesting that militias and law enforcement were basically indistinguishable. The Guardian ran the rather panicked and hyperbolically sensationalist headline, "White supremacists and militias have infiltrated the police." Think tanks like the Brookings Institute observed that this alliance between patriot militias and law enforcement is resulting in militias playing an increasingly prominent role in American society and politics. From leading protests and demonstrations around COVID-19 restrictions to providing protection for protests was against the latest woke insanity, and now to patrolling the southern border. Militia presence and participation in civic activities is becoming more and more widespread, and more needed. Because something even deeper is going on to bring about this alliance between militias and law enforcement as something that guarantees that this new alliance is just beginning. Everyone listen to this, Biden says. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Duggar with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. You got it. Okay, folks, it's your fault. It is your fault. The tragedy of what's happening in our southern border, where Biden is intentionally abdicating his constitutionally mandated law enforcement responsibilities, isn't just a violation of national sovereignty. That would be bad enough. It's the fact that most of the fentanyl that's killing tens of thousands of Americans is smuggled overland across the U.S.-Mexico border that, according to the DEA, since last year, over 110,000 Americans have died from drug overdose. 70% of those overdose deaths were from fentanyl. This is a totally preventable horror. But don't tell that to the legacy media, they don't care. They're vastly more upset over the presence of patriot militias and the appearance of xenophobia in our southern border than they are every single one of those overdose deaths. This utterly deformed virtue signaling guarantees the continued surge in patriot militias and their ongoing alliances with law enforcement, conservative America's increasingly recognizing that liberal America has done so over. We look at our cities, virtually every city that the Democrats have overrun. And we can see with our own eyes that liberals have fully embraced societal rot and civilizational ruin. That's what the legacy media represents today. And nothing more. Conservative America knows that if we're going to save what's left of our nation, then it's incumbent upon us to do just that. No one is going to come and save us, we know that. And so a parallel society is rising up and walking away from the woke ashes. Patriots in all walks of life are standing up to defend our nation and our way of life. And that, of course, involves defending our borders as well as our law enforcement. Patriot militias are an intrinsic part of that new America, new conservative America that embraces law and order as over and against the chaos inherent in woke insanity. Liberals, in the midst of all of their incessant whining and complaining, are falling. We are rising. Our new patriot age is truly dawning in those patriots at the border. Prove it every single day. And then some significant news. So how many times can something happen or something reoccur until it's no longer a coincidence? How many people who have extremely close ties to the Clintons politically meet the same fate? Now in this video, I'm going to be very careful to avoid using certain language, because let's just say the algorithm is written in a certain way and it doesn't exactly prioritize or appreciate some of the terms related to the Clintons and all of the missing people. But of course, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Here. The Clinton phenomenon continues as two more individuals have been found lifeless, both with heavy ties to the Clintons. One was a former Clinton aide, the other a billionaire donor. And it begs the question, why is nobody talking about this? How is this not a popular topic of discussion? Because the mystery is just wild. How many times can this happen before alarm bells start to go off? I don't think there's anyone in the history of the United States that has this many connections to people mysteriously vanished. Maybe mafia mob bosses, and of course in third world dictatorship and such, but something just seems off, something seems very odd. Let me show you guys the most recent cases and let's talk about the phenomenon as a whole. Alright folks, so it happened again. Death of shot Clinton aide with Epstein ties found tied to a tree. Let's just say it was ruled self-ending. Despite no weapon found at the scene, the mysterious ending of an aide to President Bill Clinton with ties to Jeffrey Epstein has been officially ruled a self-ending despite there being no sign of a weapon near the body. Mark Middleton, 59, who served in the Clinton White House in the 1990s, was found lifeless on Heifer Ranch in Perryvale, Arkansas on the 2nd of May 2022. Almost 1 year after Middleton's ending, a police report obtained by the outlet this week revealed that the Little Rock businessman was discovered with a weapon-shot wound to the chest and an extension cord which was wrapped around his neck and tied to a tree. I could see the male was obviously deceased. Deputy Jeremy Lawson of the Perry County Sheriff's Department wrote of his arrival at the grisly scene. Notably, Lawson's account includes that while officers located a weapon case and 3 boxes of buckshot in the Middleton's BMW SUV, there was no weapon in sight. And I'm not going to say anything definitively, but holy moly, how many times can this happen, and with such suspicious case details? A wound to the chest, now that detail on its own is very alarming, very suspicious, and on top of that, no weapon was found. Well, where did it go that a random stray dog pick up the shotgun and bury it under the ground? And what makes it even more suspicious is Mr. Middleton's connection to the late Jeffrey Epstein. Middleton notably signed late, terrible individual Jeffrey Epstein into the White House 7 of the 17 times that he visited the residence. The Daily Mail said it was also reported to have flown on Epstein's infamous certain word express jet. So this is an individual who had direct ties not only to Bill Clinton, not only to the Clintons, but to Jeffrey Epstein as well, personally signing him into the White House 7 times of the 17 times that he visited during the Clinton administration. You know, it'd be one thing if all of these cases were totally isolated, but they all seem to have a common denominator. That's the Clintons and Jeffrey Epstein. We're now also getting reports that billionaire financier Thomas H. Lee has been found with a self-inflicted wound in his New York City office. Now this one could be an isolated situation, we don't know exactly. But supposedly this individual also had connections to the Clintons. Now how many times can situations like this occur until people start to get suspicious? I mean, As if the Jeffrey Epstein incident on its own doesn't raise suspicions. Then a year later, one of his closest associates in a French prison meets the exact same fate. At some point, you got to be asking yourself, it's too much a coincidence. There's too many people that are all connected to the same sort of group, all of them in White House invitation logs on Epstein's island and his flight log, all of these people with these clearly deep connections involved in whatever nefarious stuff that they were doing. It just happened to end up missing or taking their own lives with very, very suspicious circumstances that frankly, make no sense. And the sheer quantity, the sheer magnitude is staggering. I don't know anybody again, who isn't a crime lord, or a warlord or a dictator that has this many people associated with them going missing or taking their own lives. I mean, the magnitude of it is so massive that the phenomenon itself has its own Wikipedia page. Again, we're going to take a step back, and we're not going to say specific words, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what Wikipedia page this is. There's an entire list of alleged victims, the main victims, as you guys can see here, with possibly another one added to the list. This individual Mark Middleton, I believe his name is, but those are just the core individuals as you go down. You see, there's other people supposedly involved. And supposedly, this list on the Wikipedia page doesn't even represent the totality. It's a ridiculous amount of people. And the list keeps growing and growing every single year. It feels like the media wants you to shut up and not question the official narrative. They've already determined that it's an unhinged conspiracy theory. But the more time goes on and the more people are added to this list, the more questions I have. You might have been able to convince me that it was just a coincidence, maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago. Probably not. But anyways, yeah, just for the sake of conversation. But the more time goes on, the more I'm just not buying the official narrative. It's too many people part of the same clique, and understanding the very dark history and the fact that a certain list from a certain court case is supposedly going to be released with 165 names on it, and how many distracting stories there are currently in the news cycle, trying to pull our attention away from it all. Well, the more I'm convinced that there's something real rotten behind the surface. And what I'm really questioning is how much do we not know, how much more is going on with these unsavory individuals that we aren't aware of? And how much of what internet sleuths uncovered not too long ago during the 2015 election involving key figures in a particular campaign, how much of it is actually true? And what exactly are they trying to hide? With this many people just dropping lifeless and disappearing? Something smells real bad. I guess that's what I'll say. I'll keep it vague. It's just impossible that all of these events are coincidental. Too much suspicious information and too many common denominators and connecting factors. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below and hit subscribe.